has us switching from scene to scene between Jesus' arrests and Peter's denial, and Peter even saying that he doesn't even know Jesus. It opens with Jesus praying, and then Judas sells out, and Peter whips out his sword and Van Goghs a guy, and then Jesus is arrested. And then there's a scene change. And a servant woman asks Peter if he is one of Jesus' disciples. And without hesitation, Peter says, no, not me. I'm not one of his. Another scene change. And the high priest is interrogating Jesus. Another scene change. And Peter proclaims no allegiance to Jesus for the third time. And a rooster crows. And with that crowing rooster is ushered in a light of reality that throws Peter into a total tailspin. And today we have yet another scene change. It starts on page 175 in your New Testaments on your chairs, and it begins on verse 28. John 18, verse 28. The heading for this section is Jesus is brought before Pilate. When the Jewish leaders took Jesus from Caiaphas to the palace of the Roman governor, by now it was early morning, and the Jewish leaders did not want to be made unclean. They wanted to be able to eat the Passover meal, so they did not enter the palace. Pilate came out to them, and he asked, "What charges are you bringing against this man?" "He has committed crimes," they replied. "If he hadn't, we would not have brought him over to you." Pilate said, "Take him yourselves, judge him by your own law." But they wouldn't have the right to put anyone to death, they complained. This happened so that what Jesus said about how he was going to die would come true. Then Pilate went back inside to the palace. He ordered Jesus to be brought to him. And Pilate asked him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" "Is that your own idea?" Jesus asked. "Or did others talk to you about me?" "Am I a Jew?" Pilate replied. "Your own people and chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus says, "My kingdom is not of this world. If it were, those who serve me would fight. They would try to keep the Jewish leaders from arresting me. My kingdom is not of this place." "So you are a king," said Pilate. Jesus answered, "You say that I'm a king. In fact, that's the reason I was born. I was born to come into the world to testify to the truth. Everyone who is on the side of truth listens to me." "What is truth?" Pilate replied. Then Pilate went out to the Jews gathered there, and he said, "I find no basis for any charge against him. But you have a practice at Passover time. At that time you asked me to send one person free. Do you want me to set the king of the Jews free?" And they shouted back, "No, no, not him. Give us Barabbas." Barabbas had taken part in an armed struggle against the country's rulers. There's a couple of things that really hit me in this conversation between Jesus and Pilate. First is this question when Jesus says, "So, how did you come to know about me?" Or did somebody else tell you about me? And that could go one of a couple of ways. Did somebody narc me out, like Judas? Or did someone tell you about God's love and what Jesus is doing to usher it in? Either way, it's a really good question, and I'd love for you to answer that for yourself. So if you want, just take a minute and pause the video and think about how you became to believe in Jesus. Who were those people in your life? Who brought you to faith? Or have you been on your own journey this whole time? I hope that you took a little bit of time to think about that. Christianity, at least in North America, is at a very interesting crossroads right now. There are many, many people who have been disenfranchised from religion or have had a bad experience with the church and that spilled into their faith, in which they become cynical at best or non-existent in their faith at worst. Now is also a time where people who have not heard of the good news of God's love in Jesus, or if they have, it's been totally jaded by things that they've seen on TV or information outlets. So Jesus asked the question, did others tell you about me? Or for us, maybe the question can be interpreted like this: are you telling others about me? A couple of stories about telling others about Jesus. There's this one woman that I know who's in several of the meetings that I attend. She always wears a crucifix necklace around her neck and was asked by a colleague what that thing was all about. And she shared with this colleague that this is Jesus, and it reminds her of how much she is loved by him and how much she in turn loves him, and that Jesus is her Savior. And that person inquiring said, I knew there was a reason that I had to come and talk to you today. I'm a Christian too, and I'm in kind of a bit of a snag, and I need somebody to pray with. Will you please pray with me? And they did. Right there. In public. Another woman has this note taped to her computer monitor. It says, this is the person God has asked me to love today. So, that sounds really good if it's just on your computer monitor, right? Well, there was this one day where a particularly difficult person was in her office, and she was dealing with this person, and when that person had left, her boss came in, who happens to be a non-practicing Jewish person, pointed at the note and saying, this was the person that God was asking you to love today. Then there's this guy who at company gatherings is the one who is asked to share the prayer before the meal. Later on one evening, a workmate came to him and said, hey, I didn't know that you were a Christian man. And his response was, I'm sorry. I should be living my faith more openly so that people can see what I believe. This same guy was at Culver's for lunch one day, and it was going crazy nuts with these kids running around and doing craziness. But when his lunch comes before him, he bowed his head to pray over his meal. It was just a normal thing for him. What happened around him might have been a miracle. Everybody got quiet. All of these teenagers who were having just a great time out at lunch together saw this man pray over his meal, and they gave him silence. And when he was done, they started off having their good time once again. So Jesus asked the question, did others talk to you about me? See, there's this vibe, there's a desire, there's a yearning out there that people have about being part of something way bigger than themselves. It's something that isn't quenched through social clubs or associations or not even work or sometimes not even our family. And it has something to do with mystery and with truth. Mystery of this creative and intimately present God, and truth that God's love for us is without boundaries and without a defined way of interacting or worship, without limitations and without fears and without conforming. The truth Jesus speaks of leads to Pilate asking, "What is truth?" And I'm not sure I have an answer for that. I do know when I'm experiencing it, however. See, I think the truth and fact are a little bit different. They're not always mutually exclusive, but they're different. What I found was that fact falls within the definition of truth. But truth does not always have to be fact. Facts you can point to, facts you can prove. Truth is much bigger and broader, and it can't really be pinpointed. Jesus taught in truths. He says, "I am the bread of life." Well, was he really bread? Not so much. Is he the bread of life? Absolutely true, because he quenches our spiritual hunger. He refers to himself as the light of the world. Is he a lamp? Not so much. A flickering flame? I don't think so. But the truth is that he is a beacon that casts out all darkness. Stories about a lost coin or a lost sheep, they probably never happened. At least, not with the facts. But the truth reflects the nature of God, to always be seeking out those peoples that God treasures. You and me, all of creation. Following Jesus is about faithfully living in the truth. It's about pointing to and sharing the truth. We're about allowing truth to encompass every part of our day. Proving facts about Jesus and faith is next to impossible for someone who doesn't want to hear it. I guess that's why we call it faith. Our faith comes alive in our living, in our emulating, in our sharing the mystery and the truth about God's amazing love for Jesus in us. Sometimes we need to give ourselves permission to live by faith without having to prove ourselves. So here's some permission. You are free to let go of the need to prove who you are and what you believe. And with that, you are also free to live in the mystery, love, faith, and truth that is gifted to us by Jesus. That's what I got. Live in the truth. Jesus says that the truth will set you free.